Have you ever caught yourself saying something and later thought, why did I react like that? You knew it wasn't entirely true. You knew it didn't fully match how you felt. But in that moment, it felt necessary. We often assume that when our reactions don't line up with reality, we are being dishonest with others or with ourselves. But psychology offers a different explanation. What if your brain isn't lying? What if it's defending you? Today we are going to talk about defense mechanism, not as flaws, not as manipulation, and not as character defects, but as unconscious survival strategies your mind learned to keep you emotionally safe. Because once you understand why your brain defends the way it does, you can stop fighting yourself and start responding with awareness instead of shame. Defense mechanisms are automatic, unconscious, psychological processes that protect you from emotional pain, threat, or internal conflict. They are not choices, they are not deliberate, and most of the time, you don't even realize they are happening. Your brain's primary job is not accuracy, it's protection. Protection of your self image, your sense of safety, your emotional equilibrium. When something threatens those criticism, rejection, shame, loss, your mind steps in before conscious thought does. Not to tell the truth, but to reduce emotional danger. That's why defense mechanisms feel convincing. They don't feel like excuses, they feel like reality. Here's something important that often gets missed. Defense mechanisms develop for a reason, most of them from early in life when you didn't have language for emotions, control over your environment, safe people to process feelings with. So your brain adapted. If expressing anger wasn't safe, you learned to suppress it. If vulnerability led to rejection, you learned to intellectualize. If emotions felt overwhelming, you learned to disconnect. These strategies worked. They kept you functioning. They helped you survive. The problem isn't that you have defenses. The problem is when old protection strategies keep running in new situations when they are no longer needed. Let's look at how defenses show up in everyday thinking. You might say, I don't care, when you actually care deeply. It's not a big deal when something hurt. They're overreacting when you feel exposed. That's just how I am when change feels unsafe. They aren't lies, they're emotional shields. Your brain isn't trying to distort reality miraculously, it's trying to simplify reality enough for you to tolerate it. Defense mechanisms reduce emotional complexity. They dull pain. They minimize threat. They restore a sense of control. But they do so at a cost. Common defense mechanism in daily life. Defense mechanism don't usually show up in a dramatic breakdown. They show up in ordinary, everyday moments, the ones you barely notice. Let's walk through a few classic ones, first described by Freud and later expanded by Anna Freud. Rationalization. Rationalization is when your mind creates logical sounding explanations to avoid emotional discomfort. For example, you didn't get a job you wanted and say it wasn't aligned anyway, before letting yourself feel disappointed. Someone treats you badly and you justify their behavior so you don't have to feel anger or hurt. You make a mistake and immediately explain why it had to happen. Rationalization doesn't remove pain, it just wraps it in logic. Actionable awareness. Ask yourself, what emotions am I protecting myself from right now? Projection. Projection happens when your brain places uncomfortable feelings onto someone else. For example, you feel insecure, so you assume others are judging you. You feel angry, so you interpret neutral behavior as hostility. You feel attracted to someone and accuse them of flirting first. Instead of owning the emotions, your mind relocates it. It doesn't mean that the other person has no role. It means your emotions showed up before your story about them. Actionable awareness. Pause and ask, what I might be feeling that's hard to accept in myself. Intellectualization. Intellectualization happens when your mind turns emotional experiences into concepts and analysis. You might talk about trauma using psychological language but feel emotionally numb while doing it. Say, I understand why this happened, while your body still feels tense. Analyze relationships instead of experiencing vulnerability. You talk about emotions instead of from them. You stay coherent but emotionally distant. Actionable awareness. Notice when thinking replaces feeling. Ask, what sensation is present in my body right now? Displacement. Displacement is when your brain redirects emotion to a safer target. For example, you're angry at your boss but snap at your family. You feel rejected by someone important and take it out on yourself. You are stressed and release it on smaller inconveniences. The emotion doesn't disappear, it just finds an easier place to land. Actionable awareness. Ask, who or what is this emotion actually about? Reaction formation. Reaction formation is when you behave in the opposite way of what you actually feel. For example, you feel resentment but act overly polite. You feel attraction but become cold or judgmental. You feel vulnerable but present as overly confident. Your mind flips the emotion to keep you safe from discomfort. Actionable awareness. Notice extremes. Ask what feelings might be hidden under this behavior. Over time, defenses stop feeling like reactions. They begin to feel like who you are. For example, someone who intellectualizes say, I'm just not emotional. Someone who minimizes say, I don't need much. Someone who distances says, I'm independent. But these aren't personality types. They are solutions to past emotional environments. The danger isn't having defenses, it's mistaking protection for identity. Actionable reframe. Instead of asking, why am I like this? Ask, what did I learn was safer to be? Defense mechanisms become limiting when they block connection with others and with yourself. For example, you understand your patterns but feel emotionally stuck. People say they don't feel close to you even though you are present. You feel functional but disconnected. At this point, defenses aren't protecting you from danger, they are protecting you from feelings. Actionable shift. The goal isn't to remove defenses, it is to notice when they activate and gently slow down instead of following them automatically. Defenses feel invisible because they don't announce themselves. When you rationalize, it feels reasonable. When you minimize, they feel mature. When you intellectualize, it feels insightful. For example, you walk away from a conversation convinced you are fine until hours later the emotions show up in your body as tension or exhaustion. That's because defenses resolve the threat cognitively, but the nervous system still remembers. Actionable awareness. Notice delayed emotion. Ask, what did I not allow myself to feel earlier? Here's the important shift. You don't dismantle defense mechanisms through force, you soften them through safety. Defenses relax when your nervous system believes, I don't need this protection right now. A few practical ways to begin. Name the defense without judgment. Instead of, I'm being avoidant, try, I noticed my mind distancing me from this feeling. Ask what emotion came first. Defenses always follow an emotion, fear, shame, sadness, or anger. Create external safety. Journaling, grounding, or talking to a safe person gives your brain evidence that the threat has passed. Allow the feeling in small doses. You don't need to feel everything at once. Safety comes from pacing. This isn't about becoming undefended, it's about becoming flexible. Because when your brain trusts that you can tolerate emotion, it no longer needs to distort reality to protect you. Your defenses were never the problem, they were solutions formed in moments when you needed them most. But you don't live in those moments anymore. As your capacity grows, your protection can soften, not because you force it to, but because your system learns it is finally safe to feel. And that's not weakness, that's growth.